Hello, I'm going to talk today about practical steps towards open science. My name is Heidi Seibold and I'm part of the LMU Open Science Initiative in medicine. The slides as well as this video are licensed under CC BY license. Now, what are some options for first steps towards open science? They include publishing preprint, verifying data, making code available, publishing lab notebooks, using version control, pre-registering your project, and doing science communication. Let me go into details on each of them and explain what they mean. The first option is publishing preprints. A preprint is a version of your paper before you publish it in a journal. An option for where you can publish this preprint is medRxiv. So this is probably the most common place to publish a preprint if you're from the medical community. So now you might wonder if you're actually allowed to do that. Most journals do allow to publish preprints, and whether your journal that you want to submit to allows this, you can check at Sherpa Romeo, which I linked here. When you read preprints, you have to consider that they're not peer-reviewed yet. So this is actual research usually, but it hasn't gone through a peer review process. So this is something that we have to keep in mind when we talk about preprints. There's also the possibility to publish a postprint. So this is after peer review. Less journals do allow that, but some still do. And this is an easy way to make your paper open access and quickly available to the readers. Another step that you could take towards open science is to verify data. What does FAIR mean? FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So it means that other people can actually find the data, for example, online. It means that they can access the data in some way. So, for example, that it is in a format that they can actually read, and that, for example, has something like a unique identifier, like a DOI. The type of file is also important for interoperability. So if you, for example, create a CSV file, that will be readable on almost all computers. If you, however, create an Excel file, this may not be possible to read for all users since it's, since Excel, first of all, changes over time and not all people have access to a license for Excel. The last thing is reusability. So as I said in the beginning, this slide deck here is licensed under a CC BY license. Adding a license is important so that users know what they can do with the data, and something like a CC BY license makes that very clear. FAIR doesn't mean the same as open, but if something is open, it's more likely that it's fair. So if you say you have a data set that you can make available online to everyone, then it's easy to make it findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. In our context, the medical context, it's often not possible to make data openly available on the internet, but it's still possible to make it fair in a certain sense. So what you could do, for example, is you can provide the metadata online so that people can actually find it and understand what the data contains. You could make that metadata available in a way that people also know how they can contact you and what the procedure is, how you would potentially make the data available for, let's say, other researchers, for example. This is not only a nice way of sharing data within the research community and make it available for other important research, but it's also a nice way to find collaborators that are interested in the same field as you are. In bigger projects, it might make sense to have a data use and access committee that decides together who and when data can be used for follow-up research by other researchers. If you can make your data available online, there's several options, including making it available on a platform called the Open Science Framework. There's also something that's called Zenodo, Open Trials, and also LMU provides an open data platform, which is hosted by the university library. All these options that are shown here are just examples. There's so many out there. I would recommend to use a service that's non-commercial, which all of these examples are. So this would be an easy first step that you could do now right away, because you always have something like slides or a poster or some code that you can make easily available. It's not data per se, but it's something where you can try whether this works for you. So for example, go to the Open Science Framework website and just try uploading a slide deck that you've created for a recent talk. Another step one could take is making code available. Code is often easier to make available than data because it doesn't contain any private information. And it's still super, super useful for other researchers to really understand what you did step by step in, let's say, a statistical analysis, for example. The steps to making code available is first of all using scripts instead of clicking programs. So let's say you work with SPSS and you click to generate results. The problem is that that's a process that you cannot make available to others. What you can do also in SPSS is to create a script and then make that available. Even better if you use a software that's under an open license and that you don't have to buy. So for example, R or Python would be good options here. Another thing that I really recommend doing is using good names for folders and files, so that the folder and file names actually explain a lot already what the script contains. The next steps would be to document everything. So documenting an analysis script helps other researchers to understand what's been done, even if they maybe do not understand the programming language that you're using, and also to explain why you're doing the steps. This can help other researchers a lot, but it can also help you and your future self if you have to, for example, do a revision to really remember what the individual steps were for. Because I can tell from experience that I, in 3 months, don't remember why I did the individual steps that I did. The last thing is then, of course, publishing the code somewhere. The Open Science Framework or Zenodo that I showed before are good examples not only for publishing data, but also a place where you can publish code. The best thing, of course, if you make the code and data available together. Publishing lab notebooks you can do on the same platforms as well. The first important step is to first of all use a lab notebook. And that's maybe already something that's super clear to you, but not everyone does that. So using a lab notebook is a very important step if you work in a lab. Even better if you use an electronic lab notebook that you can then make more easily available to others and also in a computer readable fashion. So even if you have a lab notebook that's in paper form, you can always scan that. But an electronic lab notebook is on your computer already, and that's much more easy to publish. So whatever works for you, the first step is to use a lab notebook. Another thing you could try to do and think about is using version control. Version control is something that's completely changed my life, and I would never go back. Because not only does it help me to keep organized and collaborate with other researchers, but also it provides a way for me to have all my files somewhere backed up in a safe place. So what do we usually do? So if you don't use a modern version control system, your paper folder probably looks something like what we see here on the left-hand side. The first version is called maybe paper draft or version 1. Then you discuss the paper with your collaborators, and they give you some feedback, and then the next version is called paper update. And then finally, you think you're happy with the paper and you want to submit it now and call it paper final. But then, of course, it's not done, and your supervisor tells you, well, we need to change some things. And then you have final 2. Then the reviewers discuss something, you have to change it again, you call it final 3, and on it goes, and until you're completely frustrated. A better option is to use a modern system that also automatically keeps track of who makes the changes and when changes were made. So here on the right-hand side, you see an example for a modern version control system with Git. And this is a screenshot from the LRZ GitLab. So LRZ is the Leibniz Supercomputing Center that's hosting a GitLab server for LMU employees. But there's other GitLab servers at other universities, or even a free one that anyone can use. So you can see here really nicely that I authored this 10 months ago. So it clearly says when was it changed and who changed it. Then you can also see that I fixed typos in this change. And you can actually also go in and check which typos did I actually fit. So the red part at the bottom is what I deleted, and the green part is what I added. And you clearly see that I did fix typos, and I deleted a C in the word necessarily because I always write it with double C. The same with a cross. So you see nicely who did the changes, when were the changes made, and what did actually change. And this is something, okay, Git and using GitLab is something that you have to learn, you have to get into. But once you do have that, and once you even got your collaborators to use that same system, it's really awesome. I can only say it's the best thing that I've learned in the past years. So I really recommend trying it and learning it and using it. It's gonna make your life much more easy and lets you keep track of all kinds of files that you work on. Another thing that I can recommend is pre-registration. Pre-registration means that you say about a research project that you haven't started yet. You say what you're planning to do. An even better option is to submit that plan to a journal as a registered report. If the journal reviews it and says, well, that's a good idea, and accepts it, then it's conditionally accepted. That means you can now do the project, and if you stick to the things that you said you would do, then your paper will be automatically accepted at the journal. And I think that's a really nice thing to do, because you already know when you start your project that this is going to be a successful project in terms of a publication. For more information on pre-registration, please check out the website that I'm linking here below. So the final thing that I would like to mention is science communication. I think science communication is also part of open science, and it can also be really fun. So I use, for example, Twitter to communicate about the things I care and the work that I do. Of course, my Twitter, my tweets are openly available to anyone, but to be honest, most of the people who follow me are other researchers. I also give talks at conferences, at events. This is also mostly for the scientific community. I have, however, also started to create content for people outside of the community, for example, by posting videos on YouTube and by being a guest in podcasts or even on a Twitch live stream. Now, I've given you a couple of ideas of what first steps could be towards open science. Here I want to say that open science is not binary. It's not someone is an open scientist or someone isn't an open scientist. It's rather a scale. And I think one step at a time is a good idea. So I don't want you to take all these steps at once, but pick the one that you think is easiest for you to do right now. And then maybe in a month or 2 or 3, you might want to be ready to take the next step. So open science should not only be something that you have to do or is good for your career, it can also be something that's fun and easy and just makes you feel more comfortable with your research. That at least was the case for me. So I've taken each step at a time, always try to do the next project a little bit better than the one before, and this is how I became an expert in open science and really make all my work very openly available. But of course, I'm also not perfect, and that's not the goal of this. So I hope you have fun with this and can take your first steps here now. And yeah, good luck.